Hello and welcome everyone. I hope you can hear me okay. We will start our session today. You will learn more about how you can integrate memoQ to your Gridly workflow. We have two presenters for you today. Michael and Gabor will guide you through a live demo, which will be around 30 minutes long. It will be followed by a Q&A session. If you have any questions during the presentation, please use the Q&A session on the bottom of the Zoom panel. Now, let me talk you a little bit about our presenters. Michael is the Business Development Director at Gridly and has over 20 years of experience game and app development and localization. After he's done his magic at Gridly, Gabor will join and add the memoQ essence to the presentation. Gabor is a part of the memoQ gaming unit. He has some IT background and he's really good at communication. He can simplify everything to any level, so non-experts can understand coding and everything. But now that's enough for me. Please don't forget to use the Q&A section if there's any question, and I will pass the mic to Michael now.
Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. Okay, right. So I thought I was just trying to turn on the video and the video wasn't working, so that's fine. So yeah, I just wanted to start off by saying, well done England, of course, and apologies to our German friends. I did have a couple of flags here I was ready to wave, but unfortunately we're not going to enjoy that moment. So basically the purpose of today is obviously we've got a real mix of people. There's going to be seasoned pros that are kind of used to these challenges, and then obviously there's going to be some people who are just kind of embarking and maybe haven't kind of experienced the localization pass yet. So in this way, we can kind of demonstrate, what some of these issues might be and how you can kind of remove those issues from coming into fruition. So kind of going through the usual game issues we find, we've got, missing changes to source text, and I'll go into each of these in detail. And then we've got multi-step localization process, updates that can easily spiral out of control. I'm sure these are all very familiar to a lot of people. Lack of context, again, big problem. And offline files, is it the final file? We don't know. So missing changes to source text. So source text, especially within development, is constantly evolving, and so so you need to be able to kind of track those changes. You need to ensure that any kind of testing and feedback that then occurs is also fed into the game itself. If it's not tracked, then you'll find that there's a dead-end gameplay potentially created. So, for example, you might be told to blow up a bunch of zombies, but then that changes through gameplay testing that then changes it to capturing those zombies instead. So if you have somebody that then experiences that, then they might then find that they're just wandering around a level, unable to continue in the game. And that's basically kind of like a dead end. So what you'll then find then is that, will that player, if it's a free-to-play game, will that player, go to an FAQ and find out exactly, what it should be? But, it's unlikely. They're probably going to move on to the next game or app indeed. So yes, that's one of those kind of key things, is that missing changes. Also the fact that, you may well, start in a particular language and then move from that language into English. So English isn't always source. So you need to be able to control that pivoting from then into that English or that other pivot language and then out into global. So this, is extremely important, and this is one of the key things to demonstrate. We will demonstrate when we get to the memoQ part. So again, so it's this kind of chaotic kind of thing that we want to get rid of, and you need to be able to ensure that there's that relationship between the important parts of that process. Okay, so again, we've got regular releases now. More and more games are moving to the games as a service model. And so therefore it's very, very important to ensure that those frequent updates are being kind of kept in very close control. So this is where, again, you need to have that system that allows that freedom, to allow things to be pushed and pulled in the easiest way possible, but also ensure that those things are always monitored. So, being able to track, what's new and what's changed, working in a spreadsheet, it's very, very simple to not highlight things that have been changed. And so those then potentially can go into the live game. So again, that tracking is absolutely important. So lack of context. So again, it's kind of making sure that translators have all the information that they need to provide you with the best quality. So, code is great. Sometimes it's not always possible to have. And if you do get code, sometimes finding that particular string you're looking for is tricky to find in the game itself. So it might be a very complicated structure to the game. It may not be linear. So it's, so it can be a case of finding it is a real problem. And so if you do provide screenshots, that's also very cool. Or if you receive screenshots, that's wonderful. But sometimes, and as we've experienced many times, it becomes delivered in like a big zip file or something. And maybe those file names aren't accurately named, in which case you're kind of digging through lots and lots of screenshots, trying to find the screenshot that you're after. And then just that ability to be able to speak, translators to ask questions, pose those questions, have those answered by the team, because what you'll then find, or potentially could find, is that a translator may have thought, yes, this is the translation I want to supply, but once they review the comments that have gone backwards and forwards, they suddenly realize, actually, I assumed it was something else, in which case then this is also going to improve the quality. So having that ability to communicate is very important. And then, it's the classic, this is our release candidate file, and then it gets sent to you, and then 10 minutes later it's like, no, this is the actual final one, and then another one will come through. So it's that whole kind of, we want that single source of truth. It's that whole kind of that constant kind of delivery of update in offline files is a huge problem. Okay, so Gridly. So I'll breeze through this very, very quickly. So this is Gridly is our spreadsheet for multi-language. So basically, it's for games, digital projects. It's for anything really that has a moving target that you're trying to hit. So we have oh, somebody's talking in the background. Who's that? I'm sure somebody called out mum. All right, so creating, storing that content, the ability to branch and merge those data sets as well. Then we have the whole kind of multi-language project control, which is very important as well. And then, everything, and as I'll show you in a second, dependency is very important. So that allows you to have multiple source languages. As I discovered yesterday doing a demo, that we found that somebody actually had 3 source languages, because those source languages then went into different target languages. So he wanted to track all of those in one place. So we can do that too. And of course, we have an API and various add-ons as well, of which, of course, memoQ is one of those. And so we've been used by some cool companies, of course, already. And we've just been nominated at the Mobile Game Awards for Tools Provider and Gas Tools and Tech, which is super exciting. Thank you very much for the nomination. Right, so let's go into our demo. Cool. Right. So I've opened up this grid here. Hopefully, existing users will be familiar. Obviously, they've existing Gridly users. And for those of you who aren't familiar, hopefully the spreadsheet-like interface will be something that will alleviate any concerns about kind of looking to potentially adopt a new system. So everything that you have potentially in a Google Sheet or an Excel file can be mirrored in here, and you can scroll across, and it's a very kind of very familiar setup, and you can certainly kind of drag and drop columns and move those things around as well. So it's all kind of nice and familiar. Hopefully nobody's too scared, and you can create filters of this view. So this particular view is our default view, and so this contains every column within that particular grid, and then you can then set up a number of different types of views, which I'll show you a bit more about in a second. And then you can then just expose certain parts as a subset of this default view to certain groups and users. So again, if you're looking to keep something really kind of just share those particular things you want to share, that's up to you. You can really kind of manage that on a very kind of granular level. I'll show you a bit more about that in a second. Okay, so again, like I mentioned before, you can replicate your existing spreadsheet. So hopefully what you have in place at the moment, and then if you were to then want to use Gridly, then that person who's potentially doing the edits, etc., from the design team won't kind of go, oh no, I have to learn a new system, and and hopefully it'd be nice and simplistic. So our first issue was missing changes to source. So here we have a very important function here. So I'm going to move here to a demo view here. And so this just exposes that subset that I mentioned before. So dependencies here, we've got at the moment Spanish to English. So this is a very, very simplistic project, obviously. So it's only got 8 strings in this current view, not exactly massive. So yes, we have Spanish to English. So any changes that then happen to Spanish will then go into the English. So, and then what I'll show you shortly will then be the pivot then from English into Swedish. So you can see how those are related to each other. Within Gridly, we've got things like you can add images. You could have any type of file.
100 zombies to complete the mission.
So you can have any type of file as well. There's loads of different types of columns that you can create as well. So if I create a column at the end here, I'll just leave that as that. And there's all kinds of things like localization, single line, rich text, Booleans, if you wanted to set up those as well. So yes, I won't bother doing that right now. So if I scroll back across, we can see here relationship. So this is the missing changes to source. So our source here is blow up 100 zombies. Our English is currently translated, so we have a little flag here that says up to date. If something isn't, then it's unset, and if something changes, which is what I'll do here, then we'll see here that this is now set as out of date. So you can then see very, very easily here that, you know, if anyone within the team makes a change to that source text, it will then mirror into the target text, which is what we have here. So yeah, all tracked in real time as well. And so you can create additional columns if you want to marshal it even further. So if you want to make a change and then add another column that says, you know, I have made this change as well. If you wanted to, you certainly can do. But you can also kind of change, you can choose to filter on those columns as well. If something's out of date or unset, you can do all of that here too. So yeah, so we can also push elements to a test environment. So what I have set up here today is is this here. Let me get rid of that. Right, so we have this website now. So this could be any development environment, really. It could be a game, it could be an app, it could just be a website, it could be whatever you wanted it to be. So by using the API, we can push text into this website. So we'll visit this a few times during the demo. So we have robot yellow, which is our line here, and this is blow up 200 zombies. And so if I make a change here, so if I change this again to 300 zombies, and then go back to that page, we can see here that we've got 300 zombies here. So it kind of updates everything on the fly. Now, we wouldn't suggest you go immediately into a live environment. We certainly believe that, you know, you should go into a dev and then staging and then push it through the way you would normally push it through. But certainly if you wanted to just blam, stick it straight up there, you certainly could do, which is what I've done here. So yeah, so we've changed. So if I then show you here, if I change to English on this one here, we've currently got blow up 100 zombies, but that's currently out of date. So I'm going to change that to 300 zombies as per the source. This now says it's up to date. Happy days. If I go back here, we'll see that this is updated over here as well. Okay, so now we want to move on to our multi-step. So we've got our pivot view here. So within the pivot view here, we have, again, very similar layout to before, but now we have our Swedish as well. And so what we need to do is we need to make sure that there's communication between the Spanish English and then the English to Swedish. And of course, that would normally be, you know, it could be Brazilian into English or Chinese into English. And then from English, it would then go into potentially 14, 21, however many languages. So if I add my dependency here, I'm going to choose English here and then Swedish here. So you see that these all now appear here. So if I then add some text here and enter, you'll see that this is now up to date here. If I go back over to my website here, click on here, I've got to add some text here. So again, so this is a really kind of great function if you're doing some LQA or you're getting your LSP to do that for you. They can certainly, they're able to kind of review that text on the fly, you know, within that environment, which is, you know, it could be a huge time saver. So yeah, so it kind of shows this waterfall. So if I change this to 400, we'll show here that this is out of date, but this is still up to date because this is dependent on this. So if I now change that to 400 zombies, then you'll see that this is now out of date. So there's that kind of cascading kind of waterfall scenario that we can see here. Okay, so next one is tracking frequent updates. So as I mentioned, everything's tracked in real time. And we've got our different status. Of course, we've got our up to date, we've got unset, and we've got our out of date here. And again, like I mentioned before, you could, of course, create additional columns if you wanted to marshal the troops even further. Perhaps, you know, you could have a release column, or you could have an approved column or something like that. So when a translation comes back, you could then, if you're running a proofing pass, you could set your API, for example, to not retrieve the information from Gridly until that point that you've got the approval Boolean selected. I don't have a Boolean approval selected within this view. Cool. So lack of context was our next one. So lack of context. So what we try to add here. So if I scroll across a little bit, we've got a description column, which is obviously very, very useful. And I'm sure a lot of LSPs would love even more information from a lot of developers, because you can never have too much. Well, maybe you could, but it's unlikely. But yeah, description is very important. As I showed you before, you can add screenshots again, so very, very useful. You can add video, of course, if you wanted to as well. And of course, so all of that kind of provides a lot of information. So what I mentioned before about receiving just a big zip file, that can be kind of really hard to manage. You can certainly upload screenshots, which will then tie to the actual the record ID, the string ID of that particular record. So if you were to upload rather. Something, if I've got it here somewhere, if I scroll across, should have an ID somewhere. I've got a lot of columns in this view. A bit further along. Well, it's there somewhere. Oh no, maybe I haven't got it in there. Never mind. Okay, no, it's in there somewhere. No, I've just missed it somewhere. Not to worry, not important. But basically, so long as you've got the same ID, and the file name is the same, then you can twin the two together, so the correct image goes into the correct string. That's basically what I was going to show you there. Cool. Okay, so again, we mentioned our views. So if I go to View here, Translator View. So the Translator View, as a user, the translator will solely be able to work on their language, unless, of course, you then enable that translator to deal with any other languages. So if I select this in Translator View, you'll see that this is read-only. But they can interact with the source here, in this particular view, and then not with this one, because this is a Spanish translator, because I changed these around. So basically, you can make sure that you get the right people are touching the right things, and that's the important thing here. So if I show you here on the manage columns, you can then choose what's viewable and what's editable at this point here as well. So you can then say, okay, well, actually, I do want the English worked on this one and not the Spanish, and then you can work out that way. So now we can see here that the Spanish is read-only and that the English can be edited. Okie dokie. Right, so one of the key things again, so as I mentioned before about the whole commenting, so anyone can, any of the translators, or anyone pretty much really can add a comment. So if I add a comment here, I can unresolve this. I've already added a comment here before. Hey, verb or noun. So yeah, so basically that, oh, cracky, what is it doing there then? Yeah, well, here we go. Right, so we now have this, oh, that's weird. I'm going to have a look at that. So the whole, so the comments will appear here. Then once they're resolved, then this will appear here, and then this will then disappear from here. Cool. Right. Okay. So commenting, collaboration again, very important. So offline files again. So again, nothing really to show here, but just purely to kind of show the need for something like memoQ to allow that kind of that lack, or the no need to actually push an actual file around. And I think that's one of the things that kills us every day. Even it's certainly for developers, not just for LSPs. But yes, having that single source of truth, and it's allowing that text to go through in the easiest way possible. So if I come back up here, and I go back to my pivot view here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to get rid of that text as well. And I'm going to create a branch here. So I've got to, I'm going to create a branch here. And I'm going to call this one lock, and then save that. So this basically takes the master branch and master trunk, and then creates a branch of that particular instance in time. And then at that point, you can then play around with that branch and do the work that's required on that branch. And then you can then merge that branch back in once it's all complete. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to push this to Gabor so that he can work on the text. But what I should point out here as well is that you have a translation overview here. So translation overview will give you a breakdown on what's been translated and what requires translation. So here I have these 12 strings here. So 12 not completed, and that's 107 words. And you can see obviously everything's color coded, but everything obviously is red at the moment. So having that ability to see kind of the status of everything is obviously very, very important as well. Now, what gets pushed to memoQ is whatever is within your current view. So if you want to, you can choose to, you can then choose what you want to push by using the filters here. So you can filter here, and then you can add certain things so that the values are, so you might want to just have just those strings that are out of date, or just those strings that are new. You might want to leave a review pass for later on. So you might just want to just get the new strings out there. So you can create a filter here, which will then filter all the strings under that. Cool. So what I'm going to do is push this to Gabor. If I select over here, we've got our add-on memoQ here. It's very simple to connect to memoQ, and we have a cloud setup and a server setup as well. So you can choose kind of which process you want to use. So if I click on my push to memoQ here, I'm going to create a new project, and I'm going to call it Robo Test Database OES. Because we're going from Spanish to English, and you can also select a template, so you can reuse any templates that you like using within your process. And I've got Gridly Spanish here, and then we've got our select source language. So we've got, because we're pivoting, if I was to select this, which is not part of this this template, so I couldn't select it anyway, which again is good, because then that resolves or mitigates potential problems. So we go from from Spanish into English. Now, if you've got more target languages, of course, you can select those other target languages as well, which would probably happen on the English to global. You can also choose to push up-to-date records, and then any other columns that you want to select as well. So I'll select here my description, and then I have maximum text length, and I shall push those now. Make sure I've got all my settings right before I push. Yes, that looks good. Okay, so pushing that now. And now I'm going to relinquish my hold on the share and pass it over to Gabor.
Thank you, sir. All
Pleasure.
Right. Hey, guys. All right, so on my screen, I can actually see the project arriving to memoQ. So that's awesome. I can open it up. So at the moment, I'll just be impersonating a translator. We use obviously templates and automation in the backend, which I'll touch on in a moment. But I just kind of assigned it to myself, and since the API call at the moment to push everything back to Gridly is set to deliver, obviously everything is emptied in the backend. So what I'm going to do right now is quickly just pretend to be a translator, obviously, and confirm everything. So I'm good to go. And once I press deliver, that's going to be the trigger that we set at the moment to push the translation back to Gridly. So hopefully my translation should arrive in a few seconds back to you.
Okay. 1 second. Right, I'm just going to reshare.
Let me stop sharing then. Hopefully
Yes, that would be good.
Cool.
Thank you very much. Right, and as if by magic, here it is. So we have our English here. Now, the way we've got it set up is that I'm actually currently in a branch. So you can then see. So if I look at the branch itself and then look to merge it back in, I then select here. I've got merge and delete branch. Don't press. Oh, okay. So merge branch, and I can compare my changes here. And basically, the changes are all the addition of the English text, of course. And then I can choose different types of options up here as well to then kind of refine how you want those to be imported. And then if I merge here, the merging has started and it was merged successfully. So now if I go up to my master here, we should see the English, which we can. And if I then bring up my my site here, Then if I go to English here, then we can see here we've got all our English text for all of our robots and our upgrades here. So yes, so that's how it then feeds back in at that point there. Right, so what I'm going to do now is I'm going to now push the English into Swedish. So if I then go back to my pivot view here, and I've got my English to Swedish. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to push again to memoQ. Okay. And then we have a new project, and we're going to have a robo test database EN. And then my template is going to be one that's specifically for English into targets. And so you can see here automatically it selected English into Swedish. Again, I'll choose description and then maximum length as well. Make sure my settings are all correct. I should also point out that you can actually push to an existing job as well. So you can re-import into an existing job. So you can have that one job just changing and changing and changing over time and not having to kind of create a new job with each instance. So if I push here, and that will go back over to Gabor, and I shall stop my share again.
Cool. Let's see. So let me just refresh it real quick, and there we go. All right. So again, I'll pretty much do the same round as before. So I'll just open it up, and yeah, empty is on. So hopefully we should see some Swedish translation. Obviously, you can use your TMs and the usual memoQ features. I'll touch on those in a little bit, how it's all set up in the backend. So let me just do the same round again. I shall deliver it back to you, good sir, and you should get the text in a few seconds.
Fingers crossed. Excellent. Thank you very much. Share it again. Okay, so that should appear imminently. I should point out, so there are different ways of reviewing certain things as well. So as this kind of refresh, oh no, it's arrived. Wow, that was fast. Okay, so I was just going to say that if you have a comments tab here as well. So again, when you're reviewing the comments from translators or any other partners, then of course you can review that through here. But of course, it could be somebody internal as well. So it could be a conversation between producer and design lead or whatever it might be. So anyway. Here we have our Swedish. If I move back over here, click on my Swedish flag. Haha! It's almost like magic. Cool. And so those are the things I wanted to kind of share, kind of the simplicity of pushing back things backwards and forwards. And then I'll hand over to Gabor to talk a bit more about the cool stuff in memoQ at the moment.
Cool. Thank you. All righty. So let me just close this guy right here. So for the seasoned memoQ users, this might be a little bit boring, so I apologize. But I wanted to touch on some of the features that you can do and under the hood, so to speak, and how this works. So I'll just show you the project templates, for example, and how this is set up. So here you can obviously automate a lot of the things that happen under the hood and in the background, so you don't have to do them manually. The naming conventions and the languages, actually, by default, if you only work in memoQ, you could add them in advance, but these will all be handled by Gridly itself. So in this case, it's all good. We don't need to do or add anything. You can use metadata if you want. So you could create some additional information that might help with the project management and the resource management. So, here you can put in the client, the subject, or obviously the project. You can even make it like a little drop-down list as well. So whenever a project is created, you need to select a value. So this could be obviously the game, whether it's in-game text, marketing, website, emails, things like that, the usual suspects. And also, what's really cool is that in memoQ, you can obviously add the automated actions. So in our case, what we've set up in the backend is just to make things a little bit easier and faster to go, is automatic user assignments, pre-translation, all that stuff. And what the automatic assignment can actually do is obviously it can be external and internal users as well. So in memoQ, you can actually select internal users to be, for example, I'll just show you real quick here, that pretty much I can select people, add them into the project itself, and I can select their roles. So in this case, obviously, it's a very simplified project with just a Swedish as the target. But technically, I could select who's going to be doing what, and this can be either a single user, a group. You can do group sourcing as well, for example, so allow multiple people to work on the same file. And here is where I'd like to highlight vendors as well. So that's a very common thing that we see in gaming as well, that, for example, people take advantage of the sub-vendor workflow in memoQ. So if you work with even several vendors, you can, in fact, allow them to connect to your memoQ server and work on the files directly, or they can also, if permitted, they can also export the files out and import it into their memoQ server or CAT tool of choice, for example. And the main idea behind the sub-vendor workflow, and this is very important, is they will be using their own memoQ licenses, so you don't have to like lend them any or anything like that. And for convenience, you only need to add in the PM users. So technically, from your side, you only need to add in, for example, I have a couple of vendor groups in here, and these vendor groups contain only the vendor PM users. So you can only assign the vendor PM the document or documents, of course, and they can take care of the translator assignment, their internal workflow, etc., etc. So technically, on your side, they can do the translation part. And for example, I can do, for example, vendor one's going to be doing the translation part, and my translator, for example, will do the review pass on it. And also, since I saw that Michael actually pushed the length limits as well, that's to memoQ. That's a very, very, very common theme that we see all the time. And in that case, you can specify the QA settings, which basically the QA settings you can customize. Here you can just select it, so I'll actually show you what the QA settings looks like. So here we can, obviously, it's a ton of options you have here, but what I would like to highlight is use of terminology. So if you have content in your term bases, memoQ will check for the terminology used. And if a translator, for example, does not use the proper terminology and doesn't call the MPC the exact MPC name, or you can even mark stuff as forbidden, then they will get a warning that they need to correct the translation, etc. But when it comes to length check in memoQ, we have this guy right here. So this is kind of a proportional length check. So this can actually it's a general setting that I can say that my target cannot exceed 1.5 times the source or something like that. But since in Gridly you can actually specify the length limitations. This is not what we need, so we can go specific. And on the length tab, all you need to do is make sure that this guy is checked. And if this option is on, which is off by default, so you need to kind of enable it and save it as a new rule. memoQ can take those values coming from Gridly to check for the custom segment lengths or string lengths. So then, of course, if the translators exceed the length limitation, they will get a warning from memoQ as well and from the QA. Or just a very quick one, severity can be adjusted. So if we have warning or an error, in memoQ, we tend to be generally very nice, so everything's a warning at first, so warnings can be ignored is the general rule. However, you can set stuff up as errors, and errors cannot be ignored. So if, for example, for me, the length limit, well, if I do this, so if the translation is longer than the allowed limit is an error for me, then that's a showstopper, pretty much. So the translator will have to correct the error before they will be able to actually deliver it back. So if I had an error in my translation, for example, I would not be able to press the deliver button to send stuff back to Gridly, for example, unless that error is obviously corrected. Cool. So, well, honestly, all this and the templates itself is pretty complicated, and I think that should be enough of a kind of a little view of it. And I don't want to bore all the memoQ experts out there. Shout out to my friend Andrew in the chat. And yeah, so basically, I think now we can actually go back to the QA, for example, and have time to answer all the questions that I see that you guys have put in the chat. So thank you very much.
Thank you very much, guys, for your presentations. As you can see, we have 6 questions. So I will start with the first one. Is this the vendor view or the project manager view? I haven't been localizing games for 5 years, but do not get to see what the translation looks like in the UI within the translation application.
Yeah, this is because I think this person's. Oh, sorry, am I talking? I'm not sure if I'm on.
Yeah,
I'm talking. All right, okay. Yeah, so it's whether or not this is if they're referring to the view within Gridly, because obviously Gridly has different views. So you can set up, a project manager view or a vendor view and stuff like that as well. So you can set that up within Gridly. But I think that maybe they're referring to the website that we've hooked into, I believe. So I think in that case, yes, you need to basically use the API to be able to call like any imagery and stuff like that. So kind of the all the content that goes into that site needs to be called, and then that's generated. So the API will communicate and send text or potentially other things that that can be used in that site. So, for example, actually, I'm going to share my screen if that's all right. Okay, right. So if I go back here and I'm in my pivot view at the moment, I'll go back into my demo view. And if I then have my robot shop here, you can add. So if you want your vendor to be able to access be able to view any of this stuff happening in real time, it doesn't necessarily just need to be the text here. It can be, it could be robot yellow, of course, if I were to change robot yellow here. Let me just make sure I've got the actual, yeah, okay. So you can change that, or you could kind of move across, and we've got it set up so that, I think it's in my default view. So you've got it set up so you can actually change things like the product labels. So within here, we have like sale and wow, and then we have pricing as well. So you could say, right, robot yellow this month is actually going to be 10,000. You can set that up there. So if I go back over here, then that's now changed to 10,000. You can change what the discount number should be. You could change from the sale and the wow here if you wanted to take sale and wow off, and then change it to sizzling, then certainly you can do that too. So if I go back over here, then we have sizzling up here. So again, so you can have all of these set up so that if it is somebody within the business side of the company, then certainly they can be kind of looking at, okay, so which of these kind of makes the most sense, which one attracts the most clicks, etc. What's the most exciting for our viewers? So yeah, so you can kind of change a load of stuff, but it all depends on the functionality and the API calls that you place from Gridly into that environment. Hopefully that answers that.
Yep, I think it does. Thank you very much. Okay. So our next question is, I think that's for you too, Michael. What sort of setup do you need to connect Gridly to a staging website?
Again, this is using the API again. So I think I did read this before, so I'm not entirely sure what the various vendors with different processes would kind of entail. I think it's just a case of, if that website is being housed in a certain environment, then obviously you'll need to potentially change the API calls from one environment to another environment. But those calls are not complicated to do, and certainly we have all that documentation available on our site and in Gridly itself as well. So super happy for you to go in there and have a play around. But yeah, basically it's just API calls.
Thank you very much. So next question, is deliver per return is the only trigger for the text to go back to Gridly, or can it be done manually?
It is, it's deliver. Deliver is the kind of the ultimate button press that's required, which will then populate Gridly. Now, whether or not there's other settings that could be introduced, I mean, it'd be a case of, once we have a number of studios using this, a number of users using it, there may well be a call. Is there some other functionality that would be really super awesome? Then we're very happy to kind of hear from people who would like to do things in a slightly different way.
Thank you very much. So next question.
Oh no, this is for me as well. Come on, who wants to ask Gabor a question? Let's go. Right. Okay. So yes, absolutely. So is it possible to import files from MS Excel or Google Sheets to Gridly? Yes, you can indeed. Excel is absolutely fine. CSV, and certainly from Google Sheets, you would then export from Google Sheets into Gridly, but via an Excel file or a CSV. But you can also upload JSON files as well, but then those JSON files they need to be locked, because obviously JSON files need to be a very specific format. So those are locked once they go into Gridly, so you can't then add further strings into that grid. But certainly you can have that grid with all the JSON content in there translated, and then it comes back, and then wonderful, then you get back the JSON in the format you wanted. But certainly, we have our Unreal integration, so we have there's other kind of ways of hooking in. You could hook in using the API if you've got your own proprietary engine, but certainly there's Unity that's just about to be released as well. So there's Unreal and Unity, and then of course API for you to go crazy with. So. Oh yeah, this is me as well. Does Gridly handle pixel limitation? I'm just going to take your job over if that's all right. If it does, how is that integrated within memoQ? So pixel limitations, you can certainly add a value for pixel limitations in Gridly, and then you could certainly push that data into memoQ. That's absolutely fine. Now, how memoQ handles it, I shall hand over to Gabor.
That's me. Cool. Finally, something.
Yay!
Yay! All right. So let me just, if it's easier, let me just share my screen real quick so you can see. So the pixel-based length check is handled by the QA. So technically, we do have a setting here that you can customize and add your own rules. So yeah, basically, we can ingest it. If you have something, we can just ingest it, or you can just have it straight in memoQ as a regex rule, for example. So you don't necessarily have to have it in Gridly. You can have it in memoQ. Depends on, obviously, where the translation would happen. But yeah, it may be easier to do it in memoQ. I'm not exactly sure, but hope that answers the question.
Thank you. We got a really good question that was coming to the chat, so you may not see it, but let me find it and read it. So, can we track changes in source column, and are the translation columns connected to TM?
I was just seeing this. Do changes in Gridly? Right, this is one of the things that we're currently working on at the moment. At present, we would recommend that if you're using memoQ, that you would then make any changes in memoQ. Now, I appreciate that may not be possible because it's a different group of people that are doing the LQA part as opposed to the translation. So we're currently working on that at the moment, where I think we're going to So what we suggest is that you actually turn off the Gridly TM and use the the more powerful memoQ one. But yeah, so we're working on a way that we will be able to ping the memoQ TM and then bring that text into Gridly. And so that's what we currently have, in the pipeline at the moment. So it won't be a case of having conflicting TMs, because that's obviously what John is suggesting, that obviously there could well be two different TMs going on, which is not good. So yes, we're currently looking at polling the memoQ TM to ensure that everything stays up to date within Gridly. And yes, Gridly does allow videos for context.
Okay, thank you. And can you please, guys, show us how it works, this process when you type in Arabic?
I can't right now. Sorry, I don't actually have that enabled on my current setup. But certainly, I'd be more than happy to show that person if that person wants to see that, because I think that's going to be in the build I'm receiving tomorrow.
Great, thank you very much. Gabor, I found a question for you. Is audio going to be integrated in any way in memoQ in the future?
Probably not. Not at the moment, at least. So it's not on our roadmap for sure. But I think like audio-visual translation is on the roadmap. So at some point we may get around it, but at the moment, no.
Thank you. And we got one last question. I think it's maybe for both of you guys. Can Gridly perform a partial return or delivery to memoQ only for certain files or strings that match the criteria?
Jump in on that one for a start. Certainly from a Gridly perspective, yes. But do you want to jump in for once first, Gabor?
Sure thing.
I just jump in all the time. Mine, it's mine.
Yes. All right. So at the moment, hi Andrew. At the moment, since the trigger is deliver, only you need to deliver the entire file. So when we actually get the other triggers, basically, apart from delivering stuff back, I think that should be possible. So I think from the API standpoint, certainly. But at the moment, the way we set it up, so the trigger is delivered, and in memoQ, that obviously means you have to basically have the whole file or the entire translation finished, and then you'll be able to deliver it back into Gridly.
Sure. And then from Gridly, when you're doing the initial push, you can certainly tailor your view to the particular elements you want to send in that batch. So certainly, if there were particular strings you wanted to send, if I can just actually share my screen super quickly again. So for example, I did get Arabic working up here. I thought it wasn't in here, but it was. So it's so hopefully it displays properly. I couldn't tell you. Maybe somebody could. If I scroll across to the left here, we have path tag over here on the far left, I believe. So you can have path tag here. So if you wanted to, and you wanted to send certain things, so path tag works in the same way as a folder structure would within a traditional directory tree. So you could certainly say, okay, if I just want to send certain elements from a path tag, you could then choose to then select those and then send those for translation. And so so you can do it that way. So you can have your path tag starts with, and then you can have a value, or is empty or is filled, etc. So you can certainly send just those elements you want, and it doesn't necessarily need to be kind of everything each and every time.
Great, thank you very much. We are running out of time, and we ran out of questions. So thank you guys for everything, for your presentation. If there's any more questions, please feel free to reach out to us. You will receive a recording of this webinar as well in a few days. So thank you again. Thank you guys for the presentation, and bye-bye. Take care.
Absolute pleasure. Cheers, everyone.
Thank you for attending. Bye, guys.